Welcome everybody to the last webinar of our 2015 series. This webinar is Southern California Fruit Trees 101, How to Irrigate Your Home Orchard with Greywater. I'm Laura Allen, co-founder of Greywater Action. Before we start the webinar and talking about all the types of delicious fruit you can grow, just a few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions or comments, you can enter them on the chat box on the left, and we're going to take a couple of pauses throughout the presentation to address those questions. If you want to enter full screen, you just go to the slide and click in the upper right corner, and then you can view it in full screen. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Ty Teissere. He's a fruit tree aficionado and a Greywater installer and an educator with Greywater Action, as well as an arborist. Welcome, Ty.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Laura. So we are here today to talk about fruit and link that in with Greywater systems. And I'm excited to be here. And I'll give you a little intro on myself. So I am a California rare fruit grower, a member of the California Rare Fruit Grower Group, as well as an ISA certified arborist. I work with Greywater Action, like Laura mentioned, through education. I've also been certified through the organization, and I do install systems regularly, as well as trained for rainwater harvesting through the Watershed Management Group, as well as ARCSA. Trained at the Long Beach City College horticulture program, as well as have training in permaculture design. So I kind of have a wide background, all relatively focused on plants and water systems, and so with a very specific focus on trees and fruit. So I think this is a great topic to speak on and kind of put together all the different experiences I have and the knowledge I've kind of gained over the years from various people and places, and just kind of share that with y'all. So this is a bit about where we're going with this presentation. We're going to really focus on how to have success with fruit. This is kind of the key, is what most people are looking for, and it's often what people haven't had as much success with for various reasons, and we'll discuss that. And we're going to look specifically at our climate, our Mediterranean climate region, focus on water as a very limited resource in our climate, and then look at ways of retaining that water on site through various earthworks or basins, and plan our orchard out so we have delicious fruit coming in. We select all that and put it in the right place and get all of what we want, and then really how to pack that into less space so that we can get even more variety than often thought possible. And then I'll share some resources at the end, and that way you guys will have something to move forward with when you're done, and somewhere to take this if you need to learn some more info in any particular area. So some of the common kind of why people don't succeed with their backyard orchards and their fruit. A lot of people are just kind of they find a tree on sale, let's say at Home Depot, and they buy that tree, and it's just kind of on a whim. And it's not usually with a lot of intent, but some people are, like maybe they're looking for a specific fruit, or they just kind of come upon it. And then they just dig a hole, kind of plop it in the ground, backfill, water it, and then water it when they remember, really, throughout its life. And oftentimes this is in the middle of a lawn, and then they'll fertilize with chemicals, often, really just whatever they can pick up, again, at places like big box stores like Home Depot. And then usually pruning's kind of relegated to when it's just too tall, they need it to be cut back to a certain size, or it's just got in their way in a pathway or something like that. And that's even if the tree survives. Sometimes trees don't get even tall enough to prune, where they kind of die before it hits that point. So these are some methods that I think you can be successful with fruit, and this is what I've seen work in my own life and with clients and with other California rare fruit grower members. Really identifying your water sources and finding whether that's going to be rainwater, greywater, drip system, something, but really tapping into the water source and focusing on that. Then as you install those systems, dig out some basins are a fantastic strategy to help retain that water around the roots of our plants, as well as really dialing in the microclimate. Certain plants have certain needs, and the spaces that you have in your home and around your home all have just unique aspects to them, whether they're, we'll go into that. And so we really want to just match the spaces with the needs of the plant. And then really just finding awesome plants that look healthy when we buy them, that have healthy root systems, awesome plants that just taste delicious, varieties that just are fantastic, things that maybe not the bland stuff that can often be purchased, but unique things that have just that extra oomph of flavor. And then really it is just digging a hole, planting and backfilling. But then we're going to be adding in compost on top to start to build organic material. And even as we do this whole backfill and kind of planting, we even want to just loosen the soil a bit to allow more airspace, because oftentimes the soil that we're working in is compacted if we haven't had much garden there previously. So there's some strategies we can talk about for aeration. Add that compost and then add mulch. And we'll discuss mulch in just a sec. And then we're going to prune based on a plan, something that we have an intention for why we prune, and we're going to stick to that and be diligent about that process. And it's going to really make a huge difference in all the success. And then we hit, within 3 to 5 years, we hit harvest, and just continually building organic matter through compost and mulch, cycling back, pruning as our plan is made up, and then harvest. Now there's a little bit of weeding that'll be in there, and then when weeding, we're going to seed. And that's to take the place of those weed plants and to take the space of what they would otherwise be taking up, seeking light. We're going to intentionally plant other plants. So that's a little bit of how you can be successful. This is the process, and we're going to kind of go through this process through this presentation. So really just to pique your interest with the different types of fruits that I've seen grown here, that I've eaten, that I've grown, that clients have grown. There's just so much that we can do in Southern California, so many different varieties. So on the left, we have some persimmons. It's from a friend's house in LA. We have a greywater system installed on that tree from their washing machine. And it's a little house, 2 houses with 4 people doing laundry. So this tree has just gone nuts. And those persimmons are like a fraction of what they've harvested this year. Then we got some figs and delicious watermelons. And then the one on the right's from a client in Long Beach, where they have a massive grapefruit tree. And again, this is like a fraction of what was coming off of this tree in 1 year. Here's from our Festival of Fruit through the California Rare Fruit Growers. There was an event that we went to this year in San Diego. And this is some friends. We kind of gathered all the fruits that we had kind of acquired during the festival before and after, and had a delicious tasting party. And so many of these things can be grown in our area. Really, really amazing what we can do here in our Southern California climate. Left were some different types of passion fruit, limes and mangoes. And then right is blueberries from my backyard. We have a couple different blueberries in pots. Blueberries do fantastic in pots with their acid soil in there. And just lots of colors, lots of flavors. And then one of my favorites, this is with my old partner from an apple orchard. He sells apples at the farmers markets. He's from up in Tehachapi, and fun to kids love fruit, and there's just so many different fun ways that we can kind of bring them into. So a couple definitions before we dive into the details. We're going to talk about mulch. Mulch, pretty basic. It's wood chips. Could be straw as well, but most of the time we're going to focus on wood chips. They're easy to find, often free from cities. And they really just filter water as it comes through, and it helps retain that moisture as it comes in. It's going to break down and create like a compost and feed the soil food web that's lying inside the soil. And then in turn is going to be helping our plants out. We really do want to focus on a 4-inch depth as a minimum. That's kind of part of the reasons going into our Mediterranean climate and just being able to conserve as much moisture as possible in our very dry temperatures. Then Mulch Basin, it's just a shallow dugout basin filled with mulch, generally wood chips. You can see the photo here. It's a ring dug around this fruit tree, and the man in the picture is filling it back in with wood chips. And it spreads the water out, just creates a space in the soil for water to come in and hang out and sink down at the root level. And it prevents any pooling or water kind of moving elsewhere when we have an influx of water, like from a greywater system or rainwater system. Now, really looking at where we are on the planet and how this fits in with patterns of the planet. So we're in Southern California, which is a Mediterranean climate, identical to the Mediterranean basin, as you can see, which a lot of areas surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. But we're also a parallel climate to central Chile, down at the bottom in South Africa, and on the west and a little bit on the southwest coast of Australia. And all these places have in common that they're west-facing towards the ocean or towards a body of water. They all happen to fall within the 30 and 41 degree parallels, latitude parallels on the planet, and just has very specific climatic conditions. In our climate, we're hot and dry, as everyone knows, and we have very mild, kind of cool, wet winters. It's just very moderate change between the seasons throughout the year. That's kind of why so many people move here, because it's so pleasant. It doesn't have these large swings between super hot and super cold, freezing snow. So that's why so many people will visit here on vacation during the winter or just decide to move. But one of our key leverage points that we want to note, and it's going to really dictate some of the fruits that we can grow, is that we get little to no frost. That's pretty important because there's so many plants that are frost sensitive, and a frost will just kind of take them right out. That still happens every once in a while. We do get a frost, and it does maybe take back some of the growth on a plant or sometimes kills plants. But in general, we're selecting varieties of some of those like edge-pushing tropical plants to be able to handle that. But then the real Achilles heel that we're very much aware of right now as a culture is that we're in a drought and we just generally don't have that much water relative to other climates. So that's of particular importance. Now, the tropical climates being totally separate, further towards the center of the equator on the planet, they have very moderate seasonal temperature changes, very similar to us. Maybe a smaller range of band where they don't get quite as low as we get. We typically hit 32 and then bounce back up. But then seasons aren't defined necessarily by hot and cold, but more by the amount of water falling from the sky. And they do get a lot of it in the tropics for anyone that's visited on vacation or lived in the tropics. It's amazing how in a week they can get the amount of rainfall that we get all year. It's really a huge difference. And so what does really separate us from the tropics, mostly if we have similar temperature swings, is the rainfall. So we're going to focus our attention first and foremost on capturing the rain, tapping into these drops coming for free from the sky. And who really doesn't like free? It's awesome. It's amazing quality. There's a ton of it. And if we don't use it and manage it properly, it ends up just being a problem in our oceans, picking up pollutants off of our hard surfaces, that's from the roof, hitting the driveway and street, and then pulling all the oil from our cars that drip, the trash that gets polluted and kind of blown into gutters. All that ends up kind of going somewhere. So managing it on our own site is a fantastic strategy and definitely appropriate for your orchard. And I kind of can almost hear people like, really? We have a lot of rainwater. We're in a drought. Come on. And when you really think about it, we can run some numbers here. Even a small, relatively small house, 1,000 square feet, not that big. If it gets 1 inch of rain, which is about 2 rain events for our typical rain, would generate 600 gallons coming off of that hard surface of the roof, which if you think about it in terms of 55-gallon drums, the kind of rain barrels that people are using for gathering rainwater, that's a lot of rain barrels going into that, or they could fill up a lot. And then in particular for downtown LA, looking at our lowest amount of rain in the last 5 years, which was between 2012 and 2013. We got just under 6 inches of rain, and that would have generated on a 1,000 square foot roof over 3,000 gallons of water. Ton of water coming from there, and that's not even counting the water falling directly into our gardens, coming off of other hardscape surfaces, harvesting water off of our neighbors' roofs, pulling in water from the sidewalk if we have a clean surface to pull in from. Tons of opportunity with rainwater. The two main strategies that we think about when we're looking at rainwater harvesting is that we have active and passive rainwater harvesting. So most people generally think of active harvesting. That's where you've got your barrels, your tank set up, and you're actually storing that in a vessel. You do have a little bit more upfront cost to set that up because you're buying the plastic tanks or barrels, although they are rebated by the SoCal Water Smart, and you can get $75, I believe, off per barrel, and you can get $300 off of tanks that are 200 gallons or larger. So that's an awesome opportunity. But it is a little bit more upfront, and it's best suited in terms of the use of the water for your veggies or for compost tea, which is rainwater is great for. So that's kind of where we're generally getting the highest use from that rainwater. Where passive harvesting is something people don't often think of, but it's actually just managing that rainwater into our mulch basins. You can dig them by hand. You don't need to have any special tools really, but a shovel to accomplish it, and then grabbing some mulch to fill it back in. And you just guide your downspouts, which is very simple for kind of even people who are not generally that do-it-yourself friendly, to be able to connect from, big box store. You can buy these downspout rerouting kits, and they're a little flexible pipe that connects to your downspout and can just guide that water directly into your basins. So it's great, it's low cost, and fruit trees love it, and especially if we're going to go into the next one, Greywater. Greywater systems are a perfect combination with this passive rainwater harvesting. So now we've tapped into rain from the sky, and the next we're going to tap into these rivers in our black pipes. We like to call that Greywater. We've already gone through a couple of these webinars focusing on Greywater, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. But in general, it's gently used wash water from your tubs, your washing machine or sinks. And there's a lot that's being generated from every household every day. And fruit trees don't need to have perfectly clean water. So this is perfect application for our trees with their large root systems. So where exactly? There's two main ways that we're going to look to tap in. We're going to use our washing machine. That's a fantastic source. You have no permit to do it, so you don't have to ask any permission or have any inspectors. So no cost there. Already has a pump and it has pressure in it, which we're going to really use to our advantage. And pretty easy to install, total do-it-yourself friendly, and pretty affordable if you build it yourself, ranging from about $100 to $250 in parts. So not too bad at all to be able to tap into that regular source of wash water. And if you come to one of our Greywater Action workshops, we teach you how to do it in about 2.5 hours and give you a laundry list, literally, of your parts to take with you so that you know exactly what to buy when you go to the store. One of the cons with the washing machine is sometimes the front loaders they have less flow, so sometimes it's less applicable for certain people's situations. And they do have a smaller pump, so you have to go really far with it, or you're trying to split it up amongst a lot of trees. Maybe a little bit more problematic, but still a great source from the front loader. Now, next source for our Greywater is our bathtub. Generally, it's a ton of water. We're doing about 30 gallons for a typical bath, at 2.5 gallons per minute for most shower heads. A 10-minute shower is 25 gallons. So we're talking a lot of water if you shower daily. And if there's multiple people showering, even more. It's great quality, and it's perfect, again, for our fruit trees. This one, you do have to have a permit to be able to cut into your drainage plumbing of your house. And sometimes gravity flow can be a bit tricky, and if you have a concrete slab below your house, it could be pretty much impossible to tap into your shower water from below. And if you have a really long run of pipe, sometimes it could be difficult or just a pain in the butt to get water when you're having to dig this pipe down into the ground to use gravity. But there's plenty of situations that work really well for bathtubs, and we've built very, very effective systems from bathtubs and even sinks. So this greywater or rainwater really are both going to tie into these basins, these mulch basins. And we call these basins of relations because they really are about relationships. We're keeping in mind this Achilles heel in our Mediterranean climate, which is water. And so we're going to conserve water by taking what often is a very convex landscape. If we look at most standard landscapes, they're designed to be able to shed water in the event of a lot of rain or just any water coming on it. They're designed to shed it into our pathways and then down towards our street, away from the foundation of a house, and just get it off-site into the stormwater system as soon as possible. We're really going to kind of flip this on its head and take our convex landscapes and turn them into concave ones. Now, this is really key because it's just going to allow water to now stay on site, sink into the ground, interact with the soil microbes, interact with the roots of our plants, and allow the plants time to take it up, and even have a reserve just lingering in the soil much later after the rains have stopped or gray water stopped coming in. That moisture can just hang out in there, especially below all this mulch. And then just keep in mind that if you do have a lawn, don't be scared to remove it. It's an easy process. There almost always are going to be some, grasses coming back a little bit when you're done, but there's plenty of strategies if you look up permaculture design where we talk about different ways that are effective to minimize the amount of grasses coming up. But totally doable with a sod cutting machine that you could rent at Home Depot. Very effective to be able to just cut your grass right out of your landscape and then be able to kind of start fresh with your orchard. Now, these are some photos of what different basins look like. On the left, we have in San Juan Capistrano an installation that we did with the Ecology Center down there. And we have on the top left, we actually don't have the total before picture here. It was a convex landscape. We've reflipped it now so that it's a concave space, and we've created a very deep basin that's going to hold both rainwater and laundry, washing machine, gray water. And then on the very bottom, on the left, you see that we've kind of filled it all in with mulch. We do have gray water lines in there that they're just kind of tucked so discreetly you really can't see. And then in the center, this is a little bit smaller of a basin. There's actually multiple basins going on. In the very center of this kind of donut-like ring, that's where our tree is going to go. Just outside of that ring, in the next round basin just outside of it, is where our gray water line is getting plumbed. And then just outside of that ring is actually where rainwater capacity is built up and where we're going to move our gray water line as the tree starts to get larger and its root system gets bigger. This is in Long Beach, an installation we just wrapped up as a group install. And it's so far looking great. And once it gets covered over with mulch, you don't see any of those rings. And then on the right, this is at our place in downtown Long Beach, and just kind of really sinking that space to be able to provide water for this loquat, avocado, and comfrey plant. And we installed a laundry landscape system, 2 outlets that you can see on the bottom right with those little green lids, and also is going to provide excess space for overflow of any rainwater from our roofs to be guided into this location. So really just the point here is that basins can kind of come in different sizes and shapes, from very large on the top left, the left side, to even smaller on the right, and round to rectilinear. It doesn't really matter. It's just about the concave getting some space to hold water in the soil. Here's another start to finish. We started with a shedding landscape. You can see this is in Fullerton. Water's shedding to the bottom on the left, away from the house, which is on the right, and would go right into the neighbor's yard, and actually became an issue for the neighbors. So this is pretty awesome, where we took this tool that's on the left. It's called a broad fork that my friend Jeff's using, And a broad fork, you can look it up online. Super useful tool for opening up the pore space in the soil and doing minimal kind of damage to the soil in the process. So we broad forked this entire soil to make it loose, and then we reshaped it into these contoured swales. So this is little berms that we see, the humps, and we have got basins as the valleys, and we installed a laundry landscape system. You can see the greywater lines throughout it, kind of snaking through, and it creates just kind of almost like a terrace system when you think about different areas in Asia where they have really beautiful terraces. Kind of has that same effect of helping water to hang out at each level in the landscape. This is also designed so that the back half of the house, as well as a garage and guest house, are all plumbed into the space for their rainwater passively. Super cheap to be able to do all this. It was just the labor for ourselves to loosen up the soil and kind of move it around for a day, and then routing these downspouts into the space. Actually, already we're using the hardscape that drained right into it, and then the greywater system was kind of an add-on on top. Then we seeded it with cover crops around all of the outlets where the greywater comes out, and we did like standard cover crop mix that we got from Peaceful Valley Organic Farm Supply online, and then those kind of sprout up with the water that's coming naturally all year from the greywater. And that's just really starting to build our soil process. And we did a scratch coat, kind of just a small inch of mulch temporarily to allow those seeds to germinate. And then this winter, we're coming back to now put that real depth of 4 inches of mulch. And we're going to tuck about 16 fruit trees possibly in this space. So a lot of potential for this small, kind of typical Southern California backyard. And this is just part of that process. So the basins are really supporting these soil food web, which is all these microorganisms, this micro-universe that's in the soil. If you want to check out the soil food web, search it online and check out any of Elaine Ingham's videos or others who have info on just more about this micro-universe, the soil, the fungi, the fungi, bacteria, and insects. And mulch is really feeding so many of them. And then the waste that comes from these soil organisms is feeding our plants. Our plants are going to be feeding us through fruit, and then the waste that we have from our scraps from the food, we can recompost back into the system, and even recycling our humanure back into the system. Check out the Humanure Handbook for more details on that, or the Waterwise Home. Great resources for recycling humanure. So just checking in with our roadmap. So we've seen what it takes to be successful with fruit. Now we're going through all those steps. We're understanding where we're from in our Mediterranean climate, how that's similar to the tropics, where we're going to pull from a lot of our new types of fruits. But really the limiting factor being water. So we've seen how rainwater and greywater can help us, provide a clean water source all year long, and then how basins are going to help that water hang out once it comes in. Now we're going to look at planting our orchard, how to tuck more fruit into less space, and then we've got those resources at the end for you. Are there any questions right now, Laura? Maybe this would be a good time that we could take some brief questions.
Yeah, there's a couple questions. How could you give an estimate in hours to turn a typical backyard from concave to convex for somebody that may not be a professional, just kind of an average person?
Yeah, so often if we're talking just one person doing it themselves, we saw, I'll back up to the photos in this one in Fullerton. So there were 4 of us. 3 people were actually kind of doing all the work on the soil part of it. I was doing the installation of the greywater system itself with all the plumbing. But so for 3 people really, with one 8-hour day, we were able to completely convert it from this state, compacted, baked by the sun, into this state we hadn't done the mulch. It was actually this state. This was the end of the 8-hour day. So that would be 24 man or woman hours of work to kind of get it to here. And if we count another 8 hours for myself, that's 32 hours. That's with the Greywater installation. So that's kind of a general idea of what it might take. If you're doing it by yourself, that will take, that many hours, maybe even longer if you get kind of tired in the process and less motivated because you don't have kind of a friend to cheer you on. So I do encourage that you connect with your community, find friends that are interested in gardening, interested in being a part of it, family members, go to organic gardening groups online, meetup.com is great. To just kind of source more people who may even have more experience and be able to help along in the process and may have tools to lend. There's tools that can make the jobs easier, like the broad fork, but you don't have to have them to do it. This could be done with a pick and shovels and a rake, pretty basic tools.
And there's one kind of follow-up question. You mentioned the broad fork loosens the soil. Could you give an estimate in time savings it might have applied for that job?
Yeah, so with this broad fork, time savings, I'd say it was pretty significant. It would have actually been nice to have had two broad forks on this particular situation, because we had kind of one person broad forking where the other two were moving the soil around that was now loosened. It would have been faster to have two broad forks and one person kind of moving soil. But I don't know to say exactly how much in the time savings. It probably could have even helped 6 to 8 hours of reduced time. It really does speed up the process. I guess kind of tough to say. A lot of farmers use it to open up the soil before they plant. It's a really fun tool, very ergonomical, easy to use for anyone. They make small and large sizes, and you're just using your body weight to stand on it, and then you're leaning back on the tool once it's got tines, or like tines from any type of plowing implement that they sink into the soil, and then you rock it and you use your body weight to sink in, and then you just lean back to leverage soil up and open that pore space. And it does really, as opposed to picking or shoveling that, it saves a lot of time. Definitely a useful tool. I think it runs about $250. Some are cheaper, some are more. That's the one that I've got from Meadow Creature. Really, they give you like a lifetime warranty. Other questions?
That's all so far.
Okay, we'll continue along. So next up, planning our orchard. So really encourage everyone to take a piece of paper, take a note on your computer, and after this presentation's done, or if you're watching this later after the live presentation, kind of pause this and just list all the fruits that you love. It's really interesting, even if you don't know if they grow here, but just things that you eat regularly or that you've had before that just blew your mind. Just note all of those, and if you've seen something or heard about it but never got to try it, put that down on the list too. Don't know if it grows here, it's okay. Just find out. That's a lot of how we've done some fantastic work as a community in finding more fruits to grow here. Is someone got inspired, someone found it when they were traveling, and they were able to kind of do the legwork to bring that here to see. So we're going to take that list, and you're going to do some research on each one. There's some good sources if you go to the California Rare Fruit Growers crfg.org website. You can look at their fruit facts, and there's a lot of fruits listed on there of different rare fruits that we can grow in California that have details about each one. We're going to note facts based on the water requirements, and then we're going to also look at the sun requirements, whether it wants full sun, partial sun, or even shade. And then we really want to be, take all these details in note and then keep that list around. And we're going to pull it out later. Then you're going to go around, and if you haven't had a fruit that you've heard about, you're going to find it and see if you can get your hands on it to taste it. Because really tasting a fruit is going to be a key factor in whether you actually want that hanging around for the next 5, 10, 20 years in your landscape. It's a real bummer planting something that you find out later really wasn't a great variety, didn't have a lot of flavor, you just didn't like that much anyways, or you couldn't use that much of. So it's really good to get your hands on it, taste it, and see if it just sparks that interest for you. The Rare Fruit Growers, again, a fantastic resource. You can come to our meetings. We've got meetings all throughout. There's 17 chapters in California. In Southern California, there's there's like 4 or 5 different chapters in LA, Inland Empire, Orange County. There's 2 in San Diego. And so at the meetings, typically they're monthly, sometimes every other month. There's a tasting table, at least in our Orange County chapter in the back, where members bring whatever they have in season from their house and just share it with the rest of the group. And oftentimes listed with a specific variety, and the person who brought it's usually there if you need to talk with them. So awesome resource to be able to taste different things that people are growing around our area. And then I also encourage checking out our local ethnic markets. There's Asian stores, there's Latino stores, checking out the little Indias, the little Tokyos, the little other places, tons of them around LA. Those are awesome resources for finding exotic fruits. And it doesn't necessarily mean they were grown here, but often we can. And if you fall in love with something, then it's really doing that research like we talked about above to see, more about it, what's its water requirements, what's its sun requirements. You can find out if it can take a frost or not. It's all good info to know what their pests are. And then when there's opportunities around, I found out through the rare fruit growers and other friends that I've met in this kind of fruit community, traveling around to tastings to find out what you really love from a specific variety or a new type of fruit. There's been cherry moya tastings, persimmon tastings, pomegranate tastings. Nurseries will sometimes open up their orchards to try during certain seasons, like Dave Wilson's been known to do that in the past. So those are amazing opportunities and worth the trip. And then if you're traveling around for your vacations or visiting friends or family, see what other people are eating. See what's in the markets, explore what's in the farmers market type areas, the grocery stores, and ask people. Try it. Just see what trips your trigger. That's kind of our early stage of planning our orchard, is just getting excited about some fruit that we want to grow. So this is our Orange County Fairgrounds booth for the California Rare Fruit Growers that we do every year. And this is my first year participating in it, but we have a partnership with Melissa's Organic Produce, and they provided a bunch of different fruits, as well as our membership provided a bunch of the fruits that you see pictured here that we actually sample out at the event. So different fairgrounds for the kind of annual fairs that happen for different counties. Those are great opportunities also to be able to try some new things, talk with people, get some leads on some info of where to find sources of these different fruits. Here's what some of the avocados look like from different members, all labeled. There's so many different avocados that we can grow. Many people think of that classic Hass black bumpy skinned avocado with a very thick skin and pretty creamy fruit inside the flesh, but there's so many other types. I love the one on the top right. We've got this Daily 2 massive beast and this tiny little Mexican cuke, and just really a testament to the variance of what's out there. And so finding what really you fall in love with and then being able to grow that is an amazing process. At the bottom right, we've got jackfruit in the middle and some rose apple on the right. These are at different Asian markets in Long Beach that I frequent regularly to just see kind of what comes in throughout the different times of year. It's really interesting. Sometimes they'll have fruit for a very short period of time. Sometimes you'll see it loaded, and the next day it'll be bought up because people just love it when they can get access to certain fruits that they're used to from their home, or people are just excited about it. So these are a fun resource for exploring new fruits. This is a trip I took to China a couple of years ago with Long Beach City College, and they sent me out there for a horticulture expo. And this is one of the markets, pretty fantastic variety. So I did my fair share of exploration, got to try some fresh durian, which I don't know if anyone's growing here yet, but it would be interesting. Mangoes, baby mangoes, large bananas, baby bananas, different melons, so much lychees, longans, So much fruit. And this is how I roll when I travel, apparently. This was at a conference we went to in San Diego for this Permaculture Voices conference. My friend Jason and I went together, and I've never actually used, this is our hotel room, I've never actually used these drawers before when I go to a hotel. I don't stay in hotels often, but most people put their clothes and kind of pack it neat in there, so they've got their like little home away from home. But I've never found use for those drawers. I just pull everything out of my backpack and then pack it back in when I'm done. And so we had so much fruit this time around that we actually created little dividers and just had fun with it, and had a fun time with friends, just kind of bringing them in and letting them pick whatever they want. Really, really good time. This is at the University of California's experimental orchard that's down in Irvine. And they have tastings every year. Definitely an awesome opportunity if you're in Southern California, where they've got a cherry moya tasting, persimmons, pomegranates. And if you just kind of look on their calendar, they post when the events are happening or get on their mailing list. They'll email you when they come up. And on the left, those are cherry moyas, one of my favorite fruits. So creamy, so delicious. And I had no idea until I had gone to one of these tastings how specific the differences are between all the different varieties. You can kind of see on the skin of them. They have these different textures, from like a fish scale looking outside to these bumpy ones, all kind of different shapes and sizes. But the flavors themselves are super unique between each different variety. And they give you, it's a blind taste test typically, where they just put numbers, like you could see on the right in the persimmon tasting. They just put a number in front of a plate of fruit, and then they put samples out there. You grab a toothpick, try your sample, and they give you a sheet of paper that has all the numbers listed on there. And you just note things. They ask you to note for 1 through 5 rating for flavor, for texture, and for overall characteristics, and make any notes. So all these people coming through these tastings are actually helping this research orchard find out what people think of the fruits, how the kind of a test audience out in the world perceives the quality of these fruits. And then they're also testing it for drought resistance, for disease pressures, for all sorts of other factors. So good for everyone to be able to try these fruits. And then they usually send you a list of the names of the fruits at the end of the tasting and the ranking of what people thought of the flavor. And then you can go seek those varieties to be able to grow at your own house if you found something that you fell in love with. And this is Joanna, really excited about the cherry moyas. It was an amazing time. There was over 20 varieties the first cherry moya tasting I went to, so a lot to try. So now we have our list of fruit, and we're going to map our site. So this is actually going to be doing a very simple base map. You're going to take a blank sheet of paper, take a ruled paper or like a grid paper, and you're going to note all your major structures. It doesn't have to be precise. You want to get relatively close to look at where your house is, where your garage or other structure, where any large trees are, property lines, pathways, all those kind of things, other fixed elements in the landscape. Just kind of note those visually on your map. And then we're going to look at our potential water sources. So we've talked about rainwater, greywater. So we're going to note where our roof lines are, which way the house drains from the different roofs. You can take a very rough sketch of your roof and just draw little arrows for where the water normally flows. You can also make little indicators for where your washing machine is, where your bathtub, if you have access to the plumbing there to do a greywater system. So we're going to take note of all those water potentials on site, and then the potential areas that they could irrigate. Then we're going to look at the sun and shade and really dial those patterns in, and that might take paying attention throughout the day to see in different times of year to see where that sun and shade falls. North sides of structures are typically a lot shadier, where the south side and west sides are a lot warmer and sunnier. So we just kind of want to take note of all that, and then we're going to place our trees into that space where their needs are specifically met by water and the sun. Now, if there isn't an area with a lot of water, like your greywater system can't reach there, or you just have rainwater access, but some fruit trees can't do, especially the tropical trees can't do year-round on just seasonal rainwater, then we'll relegate that space to dry adapted fruits. And we'll talk about that. There's a whole list at the end. Where there's less sun, we'll consider there are some shade-tolerant fruits we can discuss. Bananas can even be one of those. They can do pretty well in low-light environments. Or if in that case doesn't work, then we can just turn that into a social space. It's nicer to hang out in the shade, put a shed there, some other structure that's not taking up our precious sunlight space in the garden, and even put up our hammock. It's nice in the summer to take that shady spot and just be able to relax. So really being able to tuck more fruit into less space is the ideal scenario. Most people would agree with that. When they have a tree that gives a ton of fruit, like that truckload of grapefruits that I was taking from the client, there's too much grapefruit for them. They can't handle that much. But that grapefruit tree is massive based on kind of how it was pruned or not pruned initially. And so it just kind of is what it is at this point. And so, but it could actually fit, 5 or 6 trees underneath in that footprint of the tree. And so oftentimes we're not necessarily looking for bumper crops of all one type of crop, especially if it's just in one type of season, one time of the year, because we usually can't consume that much all at once. So often we're looking for ways to increase the variety of fruits and share the quantity over an extended season or different varieties of fruit. And this is a little plug for Dave Wilson Nursery has awesome videos on their Fruit Tube website. They have a YouTube channel, Fruit Tube channel, that's all about these different strategies for getting more variety into the landscape. So it's good info there. And then keeping our trees pruned is a big part of it. If we have large trees, like I said with that grapefruit, it tends to produce a lot in that canopy and tends to shade out a lot of other areas, and even behind the tree itself shades out more than just the footprint below it. But if we keep them small, then we can tuck a lot more into the space. And also considering space is when we normally think of a tree as round, which takes up that kind of 3D space. But in very tight scenarios, we can often move towards more of a 2D form for our trees, prune them like a little hedge, prune them like an espalier, and it really kind of helps us tuck more into less. Keys with pruning is to maintain the practice, and Dave Wilson Nursery is all about this. Summer pruning for size controls, and kind of drilled into my head, and it does work. Most people just keep their trees exactly to their height. That way, every year it's easy to prune. You don't have to get up on a ladder, which can be somewhat dangerous in the garden with uneven soil, unless you have an orchard tripod ladder, which is a great investment if you have larger trees, but even better to keep your trees low so that you don't have to get up on ladders. Easier to harvest because it's from ground level, and see what's going on with pests, anything else. You're right there with the whole tree. And lets you just put more into the smaller space, and really just start to pack it in, so you can easily have multiple trees in the same space as one. And actually, this image previously with Tom Spellman from Dave Wilson Nursery here, he's got their classic technique. They call it 3 in a hole or 4 in a hole, where they'll dig one hole and plant multiple trees in that space. And then they're typically trees that have similar growth patterns, so that it kind of evenly grows together, but that gets maintained essentially as one canopy, and just has that much more diversity, maybe of the timing of when the fruit comes into season, so that we're not getting it all at once, but maybe spreading it out over a window of 3 to 6 months. And then we also have just an easier time being able to access it all in the same space. If we need to net it for keeping birds out, you can net it all kind of as one unit. Then winter pruning is the other side of it. So summer pruning is to keep your size down. So it's literally just hacking the top of the tree to a certain height. I recommend doing this early, not hacking a tree as it's more established with thicker diameter wood, but try and do this early so that you start your tree off right and get it to bush out and become dense down low from the beginning. And then winter pruning is where you're really going to dial in your 4Ds, and it's your dead, damaged, diseased, or often called deranged, or branches that are just kind of taking forms that you don't want. They're water sprouts coming up from the ground, they're crossing branches, things like that. So by removing those dead, damaged, and diseased tissues, that's helping with the cleanliness of the tree and eliminating any potential pest locations that they can come in, and just keeping kind of a healthier tree in general so it can move on to healing that wound, and keeps good airflow on the inside. So we summer prune to keep our size down, and then we winter prune to be able to kind of go deeper into it. Here's some espaliers, or 2D trees. The top right is a fun one. That's in Belmont Shore in Long Beach. And this one, I happened to be walking by, saw it, blew me away. And it's an evergreen pear tree. It is related to the regular pear, and it does produce pears. They're just very tiny and not really of much edible quality, but they produce gorgeous white clusters of flowers after they come out of dormancy in the winter. Really beautiful, really beautifully pruned. And it's just noting that space that its root system is in. It's crazy how, I don't know who thought of that, but it's brilliant. Got to see the homeowner, happened to be coming home right when I was stopping there with my jaw dropped, and I got to ask her some questions about it. And apparently it was before she even moved in that they established the tree, and they had to tent it for termites. So they actually pulled the tree slightly back away from the structure, dropped the tent down, blasted it with chemicals on the inside, and the trees actually made it through that whole process. Pretty amazing. And these are some apple trees, or all the rest. This is at the OC Great Park in Orange County, and great example of how to prune along fences, keep them low. Apples are classic for being able to do espaliers, and same with pears. We're really looking to, so once we've selected most of our fruit being kind of our fruit trees, we can look at other layers to mimic what a forest does, to be able to tuck even more into that same space. So we have a lot of empty space kind of below the canopy of the tree. So we can look towards berry bushes to tuck in underneath, right towards the trunk. We can look at a lot of our culinary herbs to provide their benefits, like as a culinary element, as well as attracting, a lot of them attract beneficial insects that'll help keep pests down, like aphids in our trees. And then all of that's really still shading the soil above our mulch and helping conserve moisture a bit. Really awesome ability to soak up that gray water that's coming into a landscape. And then we can also look towards our vertical or climbing layers, towards vines that can either go up a trunk of a tree, like a papaya could be an awesome resource for letting something climb a little bit. Also can have ground covers that spread laterally, like sweet potatoes work really well in our climate to keep the weeding down, because they tend to shade out any of the grasses coming up. So really starting to look towards permaculture design and forest gardening, and how to create patterns based on what a forest does naturally. Here's our list of fruits that do work in Southern California. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's some of my favorites, and I thought worthy of note. And they'll be in categories. So first we'll go through our subtropical fruits. We have our classics with our avocado and citrus, and then pineapple guavas are one of my favorites. Super tasty, very beautiful trees ornamentally, kind of look olive-like with their gray-green leaves. And as olives are getting a lot of pests in kind of this time in our area, and a lot are dying out, feijoa or the pineapple guava could be a great replacement. The flowers are beautiful. They have this red, kind of white flower with petals that are thick, almost like little marshmallow pillows, and they taste sweet and have this kind of strong perfume odor to them that are really delicious. And the guava itself is not like a regular guava with hard seeds. No hard seed of note, and you just dig them out with a spoon on the inside. If you find some good varieties, like ones coming out of New Zealand, you can get even larger fruit with different flavors. Really an amazing opportunity to grow the feijoa. Also a drought-tolerant fruit, but does even better in terms of fruit production when we give it regular water with Greywater. Kiwis are awesome as a vining plant. If we create a structure for them, you need to get them in pairs to be able to cross-pollinate each other. But those are amazing, and tons of varieties available for that. There's different mulberries, Pakistani mulberries, the long, dark, stain you, where you're just in bliss with red, purple juice down your cheek and all over your hands. I've had many amazing mulberry experiences fresh off the tree. Cherry moyas, like we saw from that tasting, so many varieties. The lychee or lychee, it's a fruit coming out of China, I believe, and it's got a really interesting, clear, gelatinous texture to the inside. Super tasty, and commercially becoming more viable. The commercial orchards are starting to plant these. And then the mame sapote, got a sandy brown skin on the outside with a very sweet, creamy orange flesh on the inside. I've seen some successful trees and eaten some delicious fruit from mame. Then moving towards our tropics, bananas, really classic Greywater plant. They'll take up as much water as you can give them. You really want to keep the pruning. It's a different style of pruning. Each stalk from a banana that comes up will produce one flower cluster, and then that's it. It dies after that. And so we want to manage them to allow one large mature stalk to come up, one mid-sized stalk, and then one baby that'll come up kind of in sequence, and then just cut out everything else, all the other babies that are trying to come up, or pot them up and give them to friends. But there's different varieties of bananas. There's dwarfs if you need it to tuck into a small space that top out at about 8 feet. And so many good creamy flavors. Papayas are a no-brainer. They're easy, really productive too. Tons of varieties there. Mangoes grow in our climate. I've seen mangoes from the foothills. I've seen mangoes on the coast, and I've eaten mangoes from all over. I've eaten them from El Monte. There's a tree that a friend has that is ridiculously good. So there's a lot of promise there. Passion fruits, that's easy to find. There's other varieties that are out too. Our Long Beach City College horticulture professor has varieties available, Jorge Ochoa. He's got like 4 or 5 varieties at a plant sale a couple of years back, all edible from different parts of the world. Got the tropical guavas, which most people are aware of, and then the jackfruits. Now with the jackfruit, amazing, world's largest tree-borne fruit, super tasty. Even some I've heard reference that it's the flavor behind juicy fruit. And jury's still out whether that's, I've seen it fruit, I've seen the trees grow, I've seen them produce fruit, but I've never actually had fruit from a tree that tasted good. They've been really dry, and so I'm yet to find that good fruit from a tree. So if anyone's found one, feel free to let me know. I'd love to know. Looking towards our temperate fruits, we got our pawpaw, which is from the East Coast. Can do okay in part shade. I've seen it grow on the north side of a house in Costa Mesa and do really well. I've eaten fruit from it. It was amazing. And it likes water too, so perfect next to your Greywater system. Then there's different apple varieties. Couple Creek Nursery in Riverside is a great resource for sourcing those and just information about warm climate apple varieties. And then if you're looking towards stone fruits, I've had some amazing stone fruits in our climate. Some years I've seen them kind of not do as hot. Depends on kind of how the year went. And then kind of moving through quickly to our dry adapted, we've got the Peruvian apple cactus, which is the photo on the bottom right. Those are amazing. They're kind of like dragon fruit, all part of the cactus family. In my opinion, easier to grow than dragon fruit. They're a columnar upright cactus instead of kind of this epiphyte kind of climbing cactus. Like the dragon fruit, equally as sweet, super good, and very productive off of plants. Very easy. Those are all from our place in Pomona. Really productive. There's blueberry and plum cactuses. The plum cactus is what you see next to the apple cactus with that deep plum-colored flesh. Super tasty. The seeds are kind of like Rice Krispies. Really awesome. And then the prickly pears are classic. And also the pomegranates, figs, classic Mediterranean climate plants. Same with carob and mesquite also. A good opportunity in the drier areas. Beautiful trees. So these resources are of note. Feel free to reference these after the presentation. I mentioned those rare fruit growers. The more info on our Mediterranean climate. That's an awesome PDF that they provide from this Oak Tree Designs out of Australia. Really breaking down the Mediterranean climates around the world and how that all works. Dave Wilson's got their fruit tube for a lot of your resources for pruning and for planting denser orchards. It's a great resource, how to prune fruit trees, all about dial in your pruning strategies as well. 2 DVDs that I can't recommend enough are Holistic Orchard and Permaculture Orchard. Those folks are totally tapped into the next wave of orchard design for urban, suburban, and even kind of rural commercial areas. Fantastic DVDs, both of them. Our very own Laura Allen has an awesome book, details out greywater, rainwater, composting toilets. Definitely worth a read. And then Brad Lancaster out of Tucson, Arizona has this awesome book to dial you in towards the rainwater harvesting and all your earthworks and basins if you need more info there. And that is all for me, folks. Take a couple questions. We're kind of just at the end of our time now. It's 5:02. Take a couple questions now, but I can also answer any later if you want to direct email me. I'll respond as soon as possible. Any questions, Laura?
Yeah, there's a question about talking about there's not much, it hardly ever freezes here. Are there some fruit trees that do require freezing? And if so, what should people try to avoid growing?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. So do some fruit trees need a colder climate than Southern California? Like, would they not do well here because of the lack of freeze?
Yes. So one example of that, it's a misconception in that is apples are commonly thought to grow more in the Northeast, East Coast, Northwest even, but needing kind of a minimum number of frost hours, or kind of a certain temperature, a number of hours at that temperature, 32, or even a little bit higher than that actually. And it's just kind of a misconception, and that's where that Couple Creek Nursery out of Riverside, he kind of just called them out on that sacred cow kind of going around that you can't grow successful apples, and just bought as many varieties as you can find. Explored places like Arkansas where they have warmer climates, and just found varieties that work. He just planted tons and tons of trees at his house, and then tasted fruits as they bore fruit, and just saw what he liked and what worked well, and then just cut out what didn't. And now he's selling based on trial experience out in the Inland Empire, what he's seen success and has great quality. So there are some of the stone fruits I've seen do better in colder microclimates of our SoCal community. And they do, on tags for the trees, have recommendations for the chill hours. But that's generally guidelines. The stone fruit in particular, I just don't see as much success in gardens as of recent. A lot of pest issues, a lot of borers. I don't know, it may have something to do with the generally warmer temperatures we've been getting and the less cold in the winter. They really do like the dormancy. The cooler temperatures can help relieve the pest pressures. So it's yeah, I think we're generally heading towards the subtropics and tropics as towards in terms of fruit selection. It's more towards where our climate's headed, and it's just better adapted to our Mediterranean areas.
Great. There's one more question. Yeah, sure. If you're using Greywater for the fruit trees, when you do your designs, how do you know if the trees are getting enough water or if you need to be supplementing with other water?
Great question. So if you were to check out one of our laundry landscape presentations we have, which is also in the webinar, we should have some details on that. Was that true, Laura, in the presentation?
Yeah, the laundry landscape webinar should provide how to calculate it. Maybe you could just answer from your personal experience doing designing systems. Yeah,
so I've seen a huge range in, from what's by the calculations, the plant's water requirements, as well as what's been just successful with plants. And I think getting too detailed on it is not necessary. It is good to run those numbers of the plant water requirements and the amount of Greywater that you're going to divide up between each plant. You can find that based on how many gallons you produce from your particular source and get within a ballpark. But I found it pretty wide range, like bananas, although they love water, they'll take dry periods really well, and they'll even take more water than you can throw at them. So they have huge ranges. Same with papayas, although we've seen some very unsuccessful papayas when a Greywater system got turned off for them, where they had a kind of a sharp drop in their moisture levels in the soil. And so it's best to keep regular moisture, especially for a lot of these tropical and subtropical plants, especially the tropical. So I think the regularity of the moisture and the mulch to conserve that moisture in the mulch basins is just kind of enough to really just regulate it over time. If you're really seeing it dry out in the soil, you can use your finger to probe, or a little soil probe that you purchase, but your finger will do the trick. Just dig below the mulch and see what it's feeling like. Just water as needed, and look at your plant water requirements.
We have one last question, and then we should wrap it up. Do you have recommendations if somebody's tree is not producing fruit, what the problem might be?
That could be many different things. Let's see. Could be that it's the rootstock coming up. I've seen that with citrus trees, where a little water sprout came up from below the graft line. The graft line you could see is a little bulge about a couple inches from the soil level, right above it. If there's a rootstock that's come up from below that line, then generally it doesn't bear often or at all, and it's, especially with citrus, very thorny relative to other branches of the tree, if there still are other branches, if it didn't die completely. And oftentimes I found that it's just rootstock that's ungrafted because it bypassed the graft, and that could be part of it. Could be insufficient moisture. We have a fig tree downtown Long Beach at our place, and it was a seedling that just popped up. My landlord had kept it, and it's a huge tree. We've had it for years. It gave fruit for a couple of years, and it was actually pretty good, so we kept it. And it's been at least a decade in the ground now, and hadn't been bearing fruit for like the last 4 or 5 years. Giving it compost, hand watering it, and then we installed a laundry landscape system and put the end of the line there where it kind of drained the end of a load. Dumped it in that area, and it's went nuts with fruit this year. So it could just be inadequate moisture. Could be the timing of moisture. I've seen that where flowers will come out, and if it's really dry in the soil, the fruit will be unable to set from the flowers. Could be inadequate pollination. If there's no insects that are around to pollinate, you might need to increase your number of flowers in the garden around your trees. You might want to hand pollinate. All different strategies, different things. It's kind of just looking at. It may just be a plant that just won't fruit in our climate. It could be super tropical and just won't produce outside of a greenhouse or in the tropics. All different scenarios. Good question.
And maybe.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. What's that?
Yeah, and any more questions, Ty provides his email, so you could send him an email with a little more info about your tree, and he could help you out.
Yeah, most definitely. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it, and I hope you kind of move forth and are in more abundance of fruit in your life. Feel free to share. I'd love to share with you, so just contact me, and love to get in touch.
Great. Thanks so much, Ty.
Thanks, Laura.